What happens is you'll look at the answer key, you'll say, oh, I get it now. How could I have been so dumb? You'll Google for an explanation. You'll feel like you understand it now. Then you move on to the next question and you do the exact same thing. So I want to encourage you, when you are reviewing LSAT questions, take the time to actually understand what mistakes you're making and why, and go deep enough in your review process that you make sure that no matter what, you're going to be able to avoid making the same mistake again. Because it's never just about the question in front of you. It's about the underlying method of reasoning that will likely show up on a future test that you will encounter. It's not about the topic, whether it's climate change or dinosaur extinction or heart disease or speed limits. And it's not really about the question stem type either, because if you're already scoring 160, 165, you're probably not getting questions wrong because of the question stem type, but rather it's about the method of reasoning in the stimulus. It could be correlation causation. It could be confusing necessary and sufficient conditions. It could be ad hominem personal attacks. It could be the absence of evidence flaw. And so you want to make sure that you not only understand the 15 or so different types of logical reasoning, by which I mean strengthen, weaken, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, flaw, must be true, and so on, but that you understand all the classic logical fallacies like those I mentioned earlier, as well as the less common flaws or methods of reasoning that only show up once in a blue moon and are about some sort of gap between evidence and conclusion that may seem unique to the argument, but in fact will show up every other exam or every 5 exams or every 10 exams. And so when you're aiming for a 170 or a 175 plus, you need to not only be familiar with these classic logical fallacies that show up in all those common lists of flaws, but rather you are also familiar with the less common fallacies or flaws or gaps that show up a little bit less often, because the problem with getting level 4 and level 5 questions wrong is that your opportunities to practice them are a bit more limited because they just don't show up as often. And so when you're aiming for a top score, you need to complete a larger set of practice tests to get opportunities to repeatedly expose yourself to these less common methods of reasoning. And every single question that you get wrong is an opportunity to learn something new. And so when you just take test after test, you take it as a chance to measure yourself, you're happy, you're sad about your results, then you quickly move on to the next. Hopefully, and by the way, you're not taking a practice test every single day, because that's a recipe for burnout and you're burning through valuable, limited practice material. And so when you are getting questions wrong, you want to slow down and say to yourself, let me look at every single question I got wrong. And not only that, but also every single question that I had difficulty with. And you want to not just look at the answer key. You want to not just look at explanations, but you want to take excruciatingly detailed notes regarding every single one of these questions. What led you to get the question wrong? What specifically led you astray? Was it the method of reasoning in the stimulus? Was it the question stem? Or was it the answer choices? And by the way, at LSAT Unplugged, we have a framework for guiding you through this very process called the Socratic Review Method. It is a template, it is a formula to help you look at every single one of these elements. You want to look at the stimulus. Was it that LSAC failed to include key indicator words for evidence and conclusion? Was it that they failed to include key indicator words for necessary and sufficient conditions? Was it that they buried the conclusion in the middle of the stimulus? Was it that they had a sub-conclusion and a counter premise? Was it they used the word unless, except, until, or without, and you had difficulty translating that? Whichever one of these things it may have been, or something else altogether, you want to make sure that you course correct that going forward, meaning that you note what you got wrong and why about the stimulus. You then review some foundational materials about that concept, or you drill that concept so that when you encounter the similar stimulus again, you'll be better equipped to handle it. If your mistake stemmed from the wording of the question stem, you want to determine, is that you're lacking in your approach to this question type, or is it that you failed to properly identify this question type because they used unfamiliar wording in the question stem? If your mistake was in the answer choices, was it that there was a tempting wrong answer choice that led you astray? Or was there an unappealing right answer choice that discouraged you from picking it? And so you want to look at what was tempting about the wrong answer choice that made you pick it, and what ultimately makes it wrong. And what was discouraging or unappealing about the right answer choice that pushed you away from it, and what ultimately makes it correct. And so you have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And you want to make sure that you nip it in the bud so that you never make the same mistake again. If you would like my help with this process, you can check out the links below the video to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. And in the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.